The following VETSIM video has been created by Aviation Pro for the P1 pilot rating course of the VETSIM Pilot Training Academy. Visit academy.vetsim.net for more information. In this video we're going to take a look at the communications during the departure. We're going to give you the basic phraseology that's being used from startup until cruising altitude. Now when it comes to phraseology, there might be differences depending on the continent you're flying in, the country, or even the airport. Now the phraseology that we're going to show you in this video is based on a flight in Europe. So there might be some slight differences if you're going to fly in the US, for example. But the phraseology that we're going to show you now just gives you a basic idea of how communications on the VETSIM network work from startup until cruising level. So we're just going to go through the communications during the different phases of flight using an example flight in Europe from Frankfurt in Germany to Krakow in Poland. We are not actually going online on the VETSIM network because of course we can't guarantee that there will be full coverage air traffic control available. But we're now just going to go through the different phases of flight step by step in order to show you what you can expect from air traffic control and what is expected from you as a pilot. So let's begin with the first step, and that's a very easy one. It's the ATIS of the airport. The ATIS stands for Automatic Terminal Information Service, and by tuning in this frequency you can get to know the latest information about the airport and about the weather at the airport. Now listening to the ATIS is very important because when you are requesting your flight plan clearance, you have to be aware of the latest ATIS information. Now the ATIS always begins with an identifying letter. It could be anything from Alpha to Zulu, depending on the airport. So make sure you listen to the ATIS, and you're gonna have to use this letter later on for the flight plan clearance. So when you tune in the frequency of the ATIS, you're gonna hear all the information about the airport and the weather. Of course, you can't actually transmit on an ATIS frequency because there is no other person on the other side. No, it's an automatic generated message that you can only listen to. So you're gonna have to remember the identification letter of the current ATIS, and the rest of the ATIS is pretty straightforward. It will give you some information about the wind direction, the clouds in the area, about whether taxiways or runways are closed, things like that. So when you have listened to the ATIS, it's time to go to the first frequency, and that's the delivery frequency. At most airports, delivery will give you a startup clearance and a flight plan clearance, and the flight plan clearance is the first thing we're going to ask. So let's say the latest current ATIS information is information delta. If you have listened to the ATIS, you also know the active departure runway, let's say it's runway 25 center, and you also know the first waypoint on your route. All this information will help you to basically make the clearance yourself already. You can basically build up your clearance and you can expect from air traffic control what they will tell you. The only thing you don't know right now is the squawk code, but by listening to the ATIS and determining the active runway and the departure route, you have basically built up your clearance already. So now let's take a look at what you as a pilot have to say. Frankfurt delivery, good day, lot 1364 at stand Alpha 19er with information delta, requesting clearance to Krakow. So as you can see, pretty straightforward. It's first the name of the station you're calling to, then your own call sign, your stand number, then the information you have, and then you request the clearance to your destination. Now the air traffic controller will probably reply with this. Lot 1364 Frankfurt delivery, good day. Clearance is to Krakow, Zulus 8 Golf departure, runway 25 center, squawk 1730. So as you can see, pretty straightforward again. Frankfurt delivery calls you on your call sign. He clears you to the destination, gives you the departure route, the departure runway, and then he gives you the squawk code. Then you as a pilot should reply with clear to Krakow, Zulus 8 Golf departure, runway 25 center, squawk 1730, lot 1364. Lot 1364, readback is correct, report ready for startup. Wilco, lot 1364. So there you go, that is our flight plan clearance, and now we can start the flight and we're gonna go to the next step, and that's asking for startup clearance. Now a startup clearance basically means that you are clear to start your flight and also to start your engines. Now normally you won't start your engines at the gate, you would do that during the pushback, but at least you have your startup clearance already. So in most cases you ask for startup clearance on the delivery frequency. Again, this might be different at your airport, so make sure you check that before you're going to make a flight, and let's see how this goes. Lot 1364 is ready for startup. Lot 1364, roger, startup is approved. For the pushback, contact ground on 121.8. Startup approved and ground on 121.8 for the pushback. Lot 1364, bye bye. So now we have our startup clearance and we are clear to start our flight and also our engines. And the next step is of course the pushback, and during the pushback you can start the engines. So in this case we're going to switch frequency, we're going to go to ground on 121.8 and we're going to take a look at how a pushback clearance works. Frankfurt ground, good day, lot 1364 at stand Alpha 19er, requesting pushback. Lot 1364, Frankfurt ground, good day, pushback is approved. Pushback approved, lot 1364. So now we have our pushback clearance and we can push back the aircraft from the gate. Now make sure you are always ready to be pushed back, don't wait for another 5 minutes because air traffic control expects you to be fully ready to push back once you ask for a pushback clearance. And also the air traffic controller might say something like pushback approved facing east or pushback approved facing south. And this means that you have to put your nose either facing east or facing south. So when you have completed your pushback, it's time to ask for a taxi clearance. Of course you ask for the taxi clearance to ground as well because they control all the ground movement on the apron and on the airport. And of course for the taxi route you can expect some taxiways and you have to be able to write them down or something or remember them, but of course sometimes you get a lot of taxiways, especially it's a long route, so make sure you have a piece of paper with you in order to write it down. And of course you know the active runway already, so you can kind of guess which taxi route is going to be used. So let's take a look at the taxi clearance. Lot 1364 request taxi. Lot 1364 taxi to holding point Lima 3 runway 25 center via November, November 4 and Lima. Taxi to holding point Lima 3 runway 25 center via November, November 4 and Lima, lot 1364. So now you have the taxi clearance, you can basically taxi to the runway, but be aware that ground might give you instructions while you are taxiing. Let's take a look at an example when we have to give way to another aircraft. Lot 1364, give way to the KLM Boeing 737 from the right. Give way to the KLM 737 from the right, lot 1364. When you have arrived at the holding point for the runway, most likely ground will give you a handoff to tower. If he doesn't do that, you have to say to ground and report that you're fully ready for departure, and then he will give you the handoff to tower. So let's see how the handoff to tower works. Lot 1364 at Lima 3 hold short and contact tower on 119.9. Bye bye. At Lima 3 hold short and contact tower on 119.9, lot 1364. So of course this instruction is very clear, you have to hold short at the runway, and of course there might be other traffic coming in or still departing from the runway, that's why you have to wait on that holding point. Now when you're switching to tower, there are two instructions that you can expect. You can either get a takeoff clearance immediately, and this allows you to take off while you are still rolling with your aircraft, or you have to line up in sequence or line up on the runway, and then you taxi onto the runway and hold your position there, and then you wait for the takeoff clearance. So let's take a look what tower will say when you have to line up on the runway. Frankfurt Tower, good day, lot 1364 at Lima 3, ready for departure. Lot 1364, Frankfurt Tower, good day, line up and wait, runway 25 center. Line up and wait, runway 25 center, lot 1364. So in this case, the air traffic control tower clears the aircraft to line up and wait on the runway. If the tower says line up in sequence, it basically means you have to follow the aircraft in front of you and line up when he is departing from the runway. Now sometimes you have to wait for a couple of minutes before you are allowed to depart, especially if there's a heavy big jumbo jet departing in front of you, because there's a thing called wake turbulence that might give you an unstable takeoff, and it's very dangerous to get into this wake turbulence, and that's why they separate the aircraft departing from the runway. But when it's safe and you are ready to depart, the ATC will clear you of takeoff. So let's take a look at how that goes. Lot 1364, wind 210 degrees 9 knots, runway 25 center, cleared for takeoff. As you can see here, the air traffic controller first gives the winds information and then he clears the aircraft for takeoff. In some cases, the air traffic control tower might give you instructions that deviate from your standard instrument departure, especially in the US they give you runway headings, or in case of parallel departures, sometimes you get separate instructions from tower as well, so be aware that tower might give those kind of instructions. But in this case there are not any instructions, so we're just going to take off and follow the standard instrument departure. So now we have the takeoff clearance, let's reply to the tower. Cleared for takeoff runway 25 center, lot 1364. So now that we are cleared for takeoff, we are ready to hit the virtual skies for the very first time. Now what happens next depends again on the airport you're going to fly from. You either have to switch to the departure frequency yourself, or you get a handoff by the tower. At Amsterdam Schiphol Airport, for example, you have to switch to the approach controller, which also is the departure controller yourself at 2000 feet. But sometimes the tower will give you a handoff. Now, as you can see on this chart, you have to contact Langen Radar, which is the departure frequency for Frankfurt, when tower is advising you to do so. So you have to wait for the handoff by tower before you contact approach. The frequency might change over time at Frankfurt, but you can listen to the ATIS in order to get to know the latest departure frequency or the frequency that's being used that day. And make sure you tune that frequency already in your communication radio, so you only have to push the transfer button in order to go to the next frequency, because we're going to be very busy during the takeoff. Lot 1364, contact Langen Radar on 120.150. Bye bye. Contact Langen Radar on 120.150, lot 1364, bye bye. So now we're going to contact the departure frequency, and there are a couple of things you have to report to the departure controller when you contact him. When you contact the departure controller, tell him the altitude you're passing, tell him what SID you're on, or in case of a heading instruction from tower, tell them what heading you are on, and this will help the controller to identify you when you are in the air. Langen Radar, good day, lot 1364 passing 2500 feet, Zulus 8 Golf departure. Lot 1364, Langen Radar identified, climb flight level 150. So what the controller says here is identified. That means he identified you on his radar scope, and he immediately gives you an instruction, an altitude instruction in this case, and you have to climb to flight level 150. As you can see on the chart, the initial climb altitude at Frankfurt is 5000 feet, but in this case the air traffic controller clears you to a higher altitude, and you are now cleared to climb to flight level 150. Climb flight level 150, lot 1364. Now as you are climbing on the SID, the air traffic controller might give you a direct, and this means that you can fly direct to a waypoint instead of following all those other waypoints on your SID, and this helps you to make your route shorter. But this will only happen if it's possible and if there's not too much traffic around. So let's take a look at an example. The air traffic controller will give us a direct to our first waypoint of our route to Zulus. Lot 1364, direct to Zulus. Direct Zulus, lot 1364. So first we had an altitude instruction to climb to flight level 150, and now we have an instruction to fly direct to a waypoint. Of course, the air traffic controller might also give you a heading in case of avoiding traffic or avoiding weather, but in this case it gives us a direct to a waypoint, and we enter that in the FMC, and we're going to fly direct to that waypoint. Now as you climb higher during your departure, at some point you are going to have to contact the radar frequency or the center frequency, because the departure controller only controls a certain segment of the airspace, and at some point you're climbing so high that he will give you a handoff to the center frequency, and then the center frequency will give you further instructions to climb higher, and eventually you will give you an instruction to climb to your cruising altitude. So let's see how a handoff to the center frequency works at Frankfurt. Lot 1364, contact Langen Radar on 135.720. Bye bye. So as you can see, the name of the next station is also Langen Radar. Don't be worried, sometimes this happens that the names of the frequencies are the same, especially in Europe. This happens quite a lot. So don't be afraid, it's another frequency, it's the radar controller, and let's see how to reply to this instruction. Contact Langen Radar on 135.720, lot 1364, bye bye. So now we're moving over to the center frequency or the radar controller, and usually you don't have to state the SID you're on anymore, because the center controller controls multiple airports. Instead you can report the altitude you're passing, the altitude you have been cleared to, and also the waypoint you're inbound to. So let's take a look at how that goes. Langen Radar, good day, lot 1364 passing flight level 165 for flight level 180 inbound Zulus. Lot 1364, good day, Langen Radar identified, climb flight level 350. Climb flight level 350, lot 1364. So now we have been cleared to our cruising altitude, and this is basically the point where our departure ends and the cruising begins. Now sometimes you also get a handoff to Eurocontrol if you're flying in Europe. Eurocontrol basically controls a larger portion of the European airspace and controls all the flights that are flying along there. So when Eurocontrol is online on the VETSIM network, be prepared to get a handoff by the center frequency, and if Eurocontrol is not online, you can just stay with the center frequency and he will take care of all the cruising flights through his airspace. So this is how the communications work during a departure, an IFR departure from Frankfurt Airport in this case. Again, the phraseology might be different in your country or continent, but you have to do some reading in order to get it right. But these are just the basics of phraseology that you can use. Of course, the best way in order to get to know the phraseology in your country is just to go fly on the VETSIM network and experience and learn it yourself. So thanks for watching this video on the VETSIM Pilot Training Academy. In the next video we're going to take a look at the ATC communications during the arrival. And we're also going to take a quick look at emergencies, what you have to do if you want to simulate an emergency, and also the phraseology that's being used in cases of an emergency. So we will see you on the next video, and good luck with flying on VETSIM.